Welcome to the New Age. This is the introduction to our lovely Generation 3 Pokemon. And this is the EX era, which lasts for a very, very long time. So, all the previous videos covering main sets in the Pokemon TCG lasted for around 13 videos, but the EX era is longer than all that. Somehow, the EX era is actually 16 sets long. Many revolutionary ideas were introduced into the EX era, such as unique reverse holo effects based on the set, which is one of the single coolest ideas that they've ever done for the Pokemon TCG. For example, the reverse holo effect for Ruby and Sapphire is the same as the ones for Skyridge, Aquapus, and Expeditions, but there are many more things to cover in this large area, and there's one of the best parts in this set is actually quite small, so we'll go over all the cards quickly and move on to the next set in no time. This set is 109 cards large, features 14 unique holographic cards, and ones that were not reused from non-holographic versions. The set was released in June of 2003 on the 18th, features never before seen Generation 3 Pokemon as well. Also, I forgot to mention, we actually landed on the floor, and it appears that we're in some kind of abandoned mansion. I think I might have fallen through the roof. But I can't wait to see what's in store for me here. And hold on, I think I gotta swap up my outfit. I've been wearing the same thing for quite a long time. Um, how about this? Ah, wonderful. Let's just get started with our review of Ruby and Sapphire. The first 6 cards are all just reprinted energies from all the way back in base set by Keiji Kinabuchi, but he's no longer being credited as an illustrator for these energies, which I don't think is that big of a deal, as long as we know who actually did illustrate them. Milky Isobe simply reprinted the Darkness energy and Metal energy from this set, and there's not much else to say about that. Of course, not bad cards by any means, but not worth mentioning for the purposes of this video. Another returning reprint is Takumi Akabane's Rainbow Energy from Team Rocket. Just a simple reprint, not much to note about that. Keiji Kinabuchi actually did work on some cards for this set as well, but once again, they are just reprints of the Energy Removal 2 and the Potion. Kai Ishikawa reprinted the Energy Search from Expedition, and the card will be reprinted many times in the future, so we'll definitely see it again. Hideyuki Nakajima reprinted the Energy Restore from Expedition, so there's not much to note about it in that department. Our next artist is one who did not work on a reprint, being Kei Hoshiba, who worked on the Pokeball for Ruby and Sapphire, which opens slowly as light emanates off of it and speed lines are behind it. I enjoy this rendition of the Pokeball quite a lot. It is simple, but it works. The next artist that we're covering is Kazuo Yazawa, who illustrated the Oranberry, which sits as it dangles off some autumn-esque tree, and the Lumberry, which grows off a purple plant. These cards are really some of the first rendition of these berries, so they serve that purpose relatively effectively, but are not incredibly remarkable. They look very 3D generated, like almost painfully so. Now, we'll talk about Katsura Tabata's trainer card, being the Pokénav, which shows off what I can only assume to be the Pokénav, with some 3D graphics showing off rough outlines for the Pokénav, with a mesh background, which looks quite nice. Next, we'll talk about Hiromichi Sugiyama, who worked on the Pokemon Reversal, which shows a starter Pokemon, being Mudkip, and his Zubat is being grabbed up by some electric energy. And as well, they worked on the Switch card, which shows Geodude being switched around for a Torchic, which is a nice visualization of what it is like to switch out a Pokemon. And our next artist is Kenny Kuji, who worked on that Energy Switch card for Ruby and Sapphire, which showcases one of the new Generation 3 Pokemon, Trico and Oddish, as they are surrounding a grass energy, with a nice reddish-orange sky in the background. Overall, this card is quite nice, especially it's for a trainer like the Energy Switch. Our next artist is one who I can actually talk about a little bit, being Kagemaru Himeno, who worked on 7 cards for Ruby and Sapphire, being the Dawn fan, which looks over to the right with a thick mist that can be seen all around it, and many dead trees all around it. The vibe of this card is quite dark and intriguing. Then, Slackoth, who is a new Pokemon introduced into Gen 3, and it's showing its butt to the camera as it slowly strolls through some grass with some nice water in the background. The Vigoroth, who is, again, new, as they climb up some kind of hill, with some rays of light poking off the top right corner, and the grass is all around it. The Makuhita, which is another new Pokemon, but I probably won't be mentioning all of the new Pokemon that they introduced, which prances around looking very confident, with a big smile on its face, and it just finished delving through a cave. The Phanpy, which shows 2 different Phanpy playing around as rolling around having a lot of fun with some nice trees in the background. The Ralts, which looks back at the camera with a bunch of trees in the background, and a deep magenta sky. And finally for Himeno, the Tailo, which flies with a pack of many other Tailo, and some rays of light flash the camera as the bird Pokemon fly around. These 7 cards by Himeno are very welcomed in the set, especially just for common and uncommon cards, and I enjoy all these cards. There's just a lot of character present in a lot of Himeno's cards, which is always fun to look at.
Whoa, what happened to the lights in here? It looks so dark. I can barely see myself. Well, I guess we're going to be working in the dark here until I can find my way out of here. All the remaining artists we have to talk about have holographic cards that are featured, so we'll start with Midori Harada, who worked on the Dust Tox Hollow for Ruby and Sapphire, which flies through the sky as it smiles, and you can see the sun setting in the background, with many trees below the card, and the strong holographic effect is really eye-catching and fascinating. Then, the fully evolved version of the first starter, being Sceptile, which looks back at the camera very menacingly, with its tail blocking some of the card, and the Aran, which walks through a crystallized cavern and looks up with concerned eyes. The Cascoon, which traverses using its spikes and looks forward with warped trees and berries everywhere. The Grovyle, which stands atop a branch and looks over to the right, looking very confident. The Skitty, which stares at its own reflection in the water as its tail stands up and some tall grass surrounds it. And then finally for Harada, the Trico, which has its arms extended out as it prances through a field, and grass and other foliage flies up. For one artist to do a whole evolution line of a starter is something that's really cool to see, and I just want to see more art by Harada. Thankfully, their art isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Another returning artist is Naoya Kimura, who received 3 cards in Ruby and Sapphire, but they made them count. First, with the Hariyama holographic card, which is in a battle-ready stance with its arms ready for whatever comes its way. There's also another Makuhita card in Ruby and Sapphire, and this one has its arms up as the sun rises in the distance, and the rocky cliffside surrounds the Makuhita, with a lone tree behind it. Then finally, the Poochyena, which bares its fangs as it stands in a field of tall grass, with a lonesome tree in the back, and spots of yellow light in the sky mixed with some nice blues and purples. Even though Kimura only received 3 cards in Ruby and Sapphire, these cards are really gorgeous and enjoyable to look at. Our next artist is Ken Sugimori, who's back for more generic artwork. Not saying that it's bad, but compared to the Sceptile that Sugimori did to the Sceptile that Harada did, it's just a matter of character, honestly. You can tell that the slacking is lazy in the hollow that the Sugimori did, but it doesn't have the wonder in the grand scale. But for an introductory set, I won't complain too much. Though, Sugimori worked on 31 cards for the set, and I think we're only going to cover a few. The camera up holographic shows the Pokemon, Camerupt, standing with a hollow border. The Gardevoir shows off the fancy skirt, and the Wailord hollow, which shows Wailord just floating through the air, which isn't supposed to be aquatic. And then, I already talked about the Sceptile, but Sugimori also did a Blaziken card, and a Swampert. He also did a Marshtomp, and a Mudkip, as well as a Torchic, and a Combuskin. But Sugimori also did some trainers for the set, being the Lady Outing, which shows the Lady Trainer class as they are going on an outing, and they have a nice little bag that holds a bunch of little Pokeballs. And then the Professor Birch, which shows the professor looking very concerned as he holds onto the bag that he has, and he has a coat on, a blue shirt, some khaki pants, with grass and trees in the background. It's nice to see Sugimori's name on a set, and these are just introductory cards, so I think I can give him a pass on these ones, but they are not the most remarkable parts of the set for me. I mean, it's almost a third of the set, yet I didn't talk about it for a very long time. Our next artist is Koki Saito, who worked on 5 cards for Ruby and Sapphire. Firstly, they worked on the Blaziken hollow, which shows Blaziken clenching its fist as fire flows out of its wrist, and has a very upset expression on its face, which is a very nice hollow for one of our starters. And then the Pelipper, which has its mouth wide open, and it flies through the sky, with other Pelippers flying around alongside it. The Combuskin has its arms extended outwards as it breathes fire right out of its mouth, which covers a majority of the left side of the card, which looks really nice. And then Saito worked on the Wingull, which, similarly to the Pelipper, flies with some other Wingull as they soar through the skies, and it's a close-up shot of the Pokemon, which is actually pretty cool. And then finally for Saito, they did a Torchic, which is very cute, as it prances along an open field with a nice bright blue sky in the background. It's nice to see that Saito was actually commissioned to work on the Torchic line for Ruby and Sapphire. Like I said with Harada and the Sceptile line, it's nice to see one artist working on a full evolution line. It gives them way more character. Our next artist is Natsuko Nishida, whose ultra cute style works really well with Pokemon like Delcatty, as it looks towards the camera with a bunch of nice light blue flowers blossoming below it. And then there's Mightyena, which sits peacefully looking at the camera with some nice trees in the background. And then the Weezing, which looks very concerned as it shoots gas out of it, with its 2 heads looking at each other. The Curlia, which just looks at the camera as it stands on some water that ripples below its feet, and some tall grass is behind it. The Coughing, which smiles and looks to the right, as gas shoots everywhere out of it. The Poochyena, which is going through the grass with a cute look on its face. The Ralts, which looks down at some flowers and appears to be smiling. The Shroomish, which looks downwards as it has a signature upset look on its face, and it stands next to a tree. The Skitty, which looks to be jumping around with some sort of leaves all around, and it kind of makes it hard to tell what the Pokemon is actually doing in the card, but that's okay. Finally for Nishida, they worked on the Zigzagoon, which just puts its little paws on a dead tree stump and looks forward and to the right. This card makes Zigzagoon look very cute and fluffy, which is something that you can't say about a lot of other Zigzagoon cards, and this is one of the first ones that we got, so you can't really say it about any of them. Overall, Atsuko Nishida always has a knack for making gorgeous and adorable cards with that soft shading style and really nice usage of light. Our next artist is one of my new all-time favorites, being Hajime Kusajima, who worked on a grand total of 8 cards for Ruby and Sapphire. And starting us off is the Beautifly holographic card, which shows a flock of Beautifly flying through a deep sky, with deep grass and a deep sky, and floor and sky are rotated around 45 degrees to look like two distinct sectors of the card, which looks very nice, with the lens flares on the card. The Seeking, which simply swims through the sea, with some coral behind it, and then the Sharpedo, which also seems to be swimming through the sea, as it looks straight at the camera, with some dust behind it due to its immense speed. The Electrike, which looks at the camera as sparks fly all around it, and the detail in this card is really nice. The Silcoon, which extends its spikes as it stays in the middle of a bunch of warped trees, quite similarly to the Cascoon. And then the Carvana, which simply swims with a very upset face. The Goldeen, which looks at the camera and, you guessed it, swims through the water. But finally for Kusajima, the Wurmple, which is probably my favorite card that they did for the set overall, and it shows Wurmple looking up as a droplet of water falls down from a leaf, which is just plain adorable. And it shows some real character for a Pokemon like Wurmple, who's not very exciting typically. Overall, I'm just happy to see cards from Kusajima in the set, and it was a good thing that they were commissioned to work on Ruby and Sapphire. One of our final artists that we're reviewing is Mitsuhiro Rita, who worked on a whopping 10 cards for Ruby and Sapphire, and we'll start with the Aggron holo card, which shows a very large and intimidating Aggron looking to the left, and a nice sheen is going along its entire body, which looks very cool. Then, the Mandarcher holo, which I personally own the Japanese version of, and for good reason. It's cheap, it's awesome, and it's menacing. It's also intimidating. I love the Pokemon's pose mixed with the deep, dark clouds that loom in the background. It is without a doubt just a work of art. Just like the Swampert, which shows the Pokemon posing dynamically as water bursts out of the background, which looks just stunning. And then the Nosepass, which stands with many other Nosepass as they stand on the side of a cliff. And then the Lairon, which is in a dimly lit cave, with blue and yellow light coming out of the left and right sides respectively. And Lairon has very deep and noticeably blue eyes. The Wailmer looks to be trying to swim on a ship and bounds around while doing so. And this is the kind of water Pokemon card that I can get behind. It's just unique and memorable, even for a Pokemon like Wailmer. And then the Marshtomp, which just splashes around in the mud and smiles as you can see its whole body, as well as the water that surrounds it, which is quite stunning. The Aron, which looks up as light peeks through the cave that it stands inside of, and looks curious and concerned. Then the other Electrike, which is shown bolting through the grass, with legs and grass below it looking very blurry as it dashes. Finally, for Arita, the Mudkip, which just looks up at the camera with a stupid cute look on its face, which is just plain adorable. I mean, how could you not love this guy? Arita is a talented artist who continues to make amazing cards for the Pokemon TCG. It was nice to see them introduced into the set along with a couple other artists. Ah, I finally made my way out of this house, and into this empty pathway with dead trees everywhere. Ugh, seriously spooky. I don't want to be here for too long, so let me wrap this up. So, that wraps it about up for EX Ruby and Sapphire. I know, pretty small set this time, right? Well, you'd be mistaken. Were you wondering where the EX part of the name came from? Well, I'm about to show you. Take a look at this beaut. Ah, yes, Mewtwo EX. I know that I didn't mention anything about them before, but we'll be seeing a lot of these guys from now on. Not specifically Mewtwo EXs, but just EX cards in general. But I think these cards are absolutely gorgeous, like the Mewtwo, for example. The borders are completely holographic, with the card itself being holographic as well. And the Mewtwo may be a 3D render, but it looks amazing. The dark colors mixed with the purple and deep red are just amazing to look at, and it's a very special thing to see, as we have many special cards like Shining cards and Crystal cards already, but the EX Pokemon were just something special and they just hit different. Like this deep, edgy style is seen on a lot of cards, and I really personally enjoy it. Anyways, this card was illustrated by Katsura Tabata, who did appear previously, but I think this should have been separated from the previous card I talked about by Tabata. Then, we'll talk about Chansey EX, illustrated by Ryo Ueda, who is actually an artist who debuts in this set, which is quite awesome. The Chansey shows the Pokemon looking up with its egg glowing, and the card has really nice deep green background that adds special feeling to the card. And next, we'll talk about the Electabuzz EX, which looks awesome. I like the Tesla towers in the background that charge the Pokemon with electricity, and I think it's just an awesome idea, and it looks plain cool. This one was done by Hikaru Koike, and just looks plain dope. The Hitmonchan EX, done by Hiromichi Sugiyama, shows a Hitmonchan primed up and ready for battle, and it looks straight at the camera. This card looks edgy and appealing at the same time, and it looks menacing and wonderful, with that light that reflects off its back. Our next EX is the Lapras EX by Hikaru Koike again. This one looks forward as deep color splash off of it, bubbles flood off the card, and the Lapras looks extremely serious. If Electabuzz got an EX, then Magmar should get one too, right? Well, it did. This one was also done by Hikaru Koike once more, and shows Magmar looking to the right with that dark shading style, which looks absolutely amazing. I mean, just mesmerizing, honestly. Our next card is the Scyther EX, which looks really cool. This one was done by Ryo Ueda as well, and it looks like an actual illustration of Scyther, which is really cool. And it shows a top-down view of the Pokemon as it primes its scythe to slice through anything. Finally, we had the Sneasel EX, which is also really cool, as it swipes its hand to the right and looks at the camera with its eye, and a glowing bright white light around it, with beams coming off of it. This final EX was also done by Ryo Ueda, whose debut cards for EX Ruby and Sapphire are just awesome. It's interesting to me that the first Generation 3 set did not actually feature any Generation 3 Pokemon as EX cards, but instead, mostly Gen 1, with one Gen 2 Pokemon thrown in there. But hey, who am I to judge? It was cool to see the starters portrayed by different artists, Trico line by Midori Harada, Torchic line by Koki Saito, and the Mudkip line done by Mitsuhiro Rita. And the introduction of EX Pokemon in the TCG was a huge deal at the time, and always has been a big deal when it comes to collectability, as well as playability. It's hard to pick favorite cards from the set, but if I really had to, I'd probably say the Swampert, Sceptile, Makuhita number 58, Wurmple, Mightyena, Delcatty, and of course, EXs, such as the Hitmonchan EX and the Scyther EX. This set may be introductory, but it's a pivotal point of not only a new generation, but a new era of Pokemon cards. Thanks for watching me babble about Pokemon cards, and I hope you can join me in the next set, being EX Sandstorm.